Welcome to my channel. This is Little Flicker. You are now watching the static website tutorial. In this video, we will use CSS to beautify our webpage. Let's begin. On the right of the screen, it is our current webpage. It is not looking very good. No one would be attracted. So we are going to beautify it using CSS today. The very first step is to create ourselves a CSS file. Let's name it styles.css. We're going to define all of our styles in this file. But before we do that, we have to link it to our HTML file. We can do that by using the link tag in the head section. The rel specifies the relationship between these two files, and in this case it is style sheet. We then put the file name or the path to this file inside this href attribute. The href attribute takes a relative or absolute path. If I don't write a leading slash, I just write the file name like this becomes a relative path. If I put a slash at the front, it is going to become an absolute path, starting from the root of this project. Now we have linked the style sheet to our homepage. Let's begin working on the styles. I'm going to start with the call to action block at the bottom, because it is the easiest to style. Let's go to our CSS file, and right here I'm going to select this call to action. I need to refer to this element. So let's find the ID of this, and I currently don't have anything to reference, so let's give it an ID and call it call to action. Okay. With this ID defined, we can now go to our CSS file and we can refer to this object using a hashtag. Remember, hashtag stands for an ID. Then we put the ID here, and the syntax of CSS is similar to the C language. We use curly brackets. And inside this section, we can define our styles. The very first thing I will do is to give it a background color. So we write background color, and we have a lot of options to choose from. I'm going to choose yellow-green, like this. We can also use RGB values using a hashtag, and we write the RGB value there. For example, 333. This is a dark gray color. We may also use a syntax like this, RGB. We can use it as a function, and we write 3 arguments. Other than RGB, we also have RGBA, which adds an extra alpha channel that controls the transparency. The next thing I'm going to do is to change the color of this title. To do that, we simply type color and set it to white. Color is the foreground color, which we can think of as the text color. Then I'm going to give it a border. To create a border, we simply type border, and it takes 3 arguments. The first one is the thickness of the border. In this case, I'm setting it to 1 pixel. And the second argument is the style of this border. I'm using solid. And for the third argument, we have to specify a color. Let's use black. And there we go. We have created a black solid border with this block. Let's try to tune up the value, say 5 pixels. Now it becomes thicker. We can also change the color to say red, and it becomes red. Other than solid, there are more options. We can use dotted. Let's revert things back to 1 pixel solid black. Next, I'm going to work on the alignment of the elements. I want both the text and the button to be aligned in the center. To do that, I will make this box a Flexbox. We use the display option and we set it to flex. By default, in a Flexbox, the elements will be aligned horizontally. If we want to change the direction, we use the flex direction option and set it to column. The justify content option will align the child elements in the direction of the flex direction. So in this case, since this is column, justify content will align these things according to the vertical direction. If we want to align things in the other direction, we use align items. And again, we set it to center. And there we go. Yeah, both the text and the button are now aligned in the center. Next, I'd like to give this box a little bit of margin and padding. Margin is the blank space around this box. We can set margin to say 5 VH. Then immediately we can see some extra space is being added around this box. It is outside of this box. The other option is the padding. Padding works similar to the margin, except it is for the inside of this box. So let's set it to 5 again. And there we go. We have added some extra space inside this box. We can also control the padding and margin values for a specific direction. Currently, if we give it one single value, it will be applied to all 4 directions, the 4 sides of this box. We can specify 2 values, say 5 VH and then 2 VH. Then the 5 VH will be applied vertically to the top and the bottom, while 2 VH will be applied horizontally to the left and to the right. Let's see it in action. We may give it more values, say 5 VH, 2 VH, 10 VH, and 20 VH. Then this value will be applied to the 4 sides independently. 5 VH will be applied to the top, 2 VH will be applied to the right, 10 VH will be applied to the bottom, and 20 VH will be applied to the left. Like this. The same logic applies to the padding as well. The next thing we can add is the border radius. We can make this box rounded. To do that, we simply specify the border radius. Usually when setting the border radius, we prefer to use px as the unit. So I'm giving it 5 px. So it looks a little bit rounded. Let's tune this value up to 20. Now it looks more rounded. We can even give it a higher value, say 50%. It is going to turn into an ellipse. Now we're done with this call to action block. Next, I like to work with the lists. Without classes and IDs, we can refer to these elements based on their tags. In this case, I can use UL and OL to refer to these 2 elements directly. By using this syntax, we can apply the same styles to both the UL and OL elements at the same time. Let's set the line height to, say, 2. And now the spaces between the list items is significantly larger. Next, I like to change the bullets of the list. Let's try to change the numbers here to Roman style. To do that, I'm referring to the OL, which stands for ordered list. And I'm going to use the list style. And we have a bunch of options to choose from. Let's choose upper Roman, like this. Similarly, for the unordered list, let's try to change the bullet style to square. Next, let's talk about overriding styles. Currently, I have UL and OL defined with a line height of 2. If I want to override this line height for the OL in particular, we can specify it again. Line height, let's set it to 10. To override something, we can use the important keyword with an exclamation mark at the beginning. This way, this line height property will have a higher priority. Okay, so we're done with the list. Let's work on the table. For the table, I'm going to first apply some borders for all the table cells. We have 2 types of table cells, TH and TD. Here, let's apply a black border. So 1 pixel solid black. And as we can see, it looks pretty weird. To fix this issue, we have to refer to the table element and set the border collapse property to collapse. Next, let's give the table headers a slightly different color. So we refer to the TH and we set the background color to EEE, which is a light gray. And there we go. I like to also give some extra padding to the table cells. So this time I'm using 4%. It looks a bit too large. So let's shrink the vertical padding a little bit. And we set it to 3% for the horizontal padding. And I think it looks pretty good. But I like to also align these table headers to the left. To do that, we use text align. I'm going to choose left. There we go. It looks nice. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is to create some hover effects. We use TR, which refers to a particular row. And I'm going to insert a colon hover. This means the styles within this block will be applied to the table row when it is being hovered. Let's try giving it a background color of, let's give it a value of CCC and important. Okay. So now when we hover over these rows, they will be highlighted. We may even make the transition smoother by using the transition property. And we're specifying the time, say 0.5 seconds. So now this will take longer for the color to switch. Let's continue working on the other parts. I'm going to work on the hero elements. For the hero elements, let's first refer to the hero class. One way to do it is to make the hero container a Flexbox like this, and with a flex direction of roll, and then we can refer to the hero left and hero right classes, and then set the width to 50%. That is one way to do it, like this. But there is a smarter way to do it. That is by using a grid. A grid is similar to a table. We can control the number of columns and the number of rows, and I will set the grid template columns 1 FR and 1 FR. This simply creates 2 columns, and both will take up 1 fraction, and they will share the same width. If we add more, it is going to create more columns, like this. For me, I prefer to use the repeat function, and let's specify 2 and 1 FR. This is equivalent to writing 2 1 FR values. Next, I like to create a gap between these 2 columns, and we can do that by using the grid gap option. Let's set it to 2VW, maybe 5VW would be better. Okay. Let's also give this a margin. I only need the vertical margins, so let's do 3VH0. There we go. Then I like to refer to the hero left class. So this time, instead of just writing hero left, I'm going to try using hero and then dot hero left. This is a special syntax. That means refer to the hero left class inside this hero element. Here, let's set the display to flex direction to column, and justify content center. There we go. Let's do that for the right part as well. Okay, that looks great. The next thing I like to do is to change the font. So let's change that. We apply it to the body element. To change the typeface, we use font family. And there are a lot to choose from. Let's choose sans serif. In addition to sans serif, we have monospace, which would be great if we are making a website about coding. Let's also change the font size. Let's set it to 20 pixels, so things should look larger. Let's also change the default line height to, say, 1.5. Okay, it looks much better now. Let's see how it looks. One thing to pay attention to is that the body element has a margin by default. So if we don't want a white margin around the web page, we have to specify margin 0 for the body element. Next, let's work on the landing section. Let's first add a div to it, wrap around the big title and the description text. Let's give an ID of landing. Now we go back to CSS and refer to the landing element. There, again, we're specifying the display to flex direction column, and justify content center, as well as align items center. We may add a background image using the background image attribute, and we're going to use the URL function to specify a link to that image. Let's also set the text color to white. The image is not very visible right now because it's a dark image. Okay, so what we can do is to specify the height of this div element. Let's set it to, say, 70 VH. Then let's set the text align to center. And let's give this a little bit of padding. Currently, the image is being zoomed in. If we want to change the section that will be shown, we can use the background position property. And let's set it to center and see how it does. There we go, it looks much better. One extra thing I'd like to talk about is the padding. Currently we have a padding applied that is 5%. The padding will make the size of this element a little bit larger. If we don't want this behavior, we want to fix the size of this element, we can use the box sizing property, box sizing, and set it to border box. So this way the padding will not make this element expand. Let's work on the navbar. I'm referring to the nav element directly, since there is only one nav element in a web page. Let's give it a background color of EEE. Okay, a light gray. And I will give it a bottom border. So we can specify the border bottom to 1px solid. I'm using RGBA 0, 0, 0, 0.15. Okay. Let's also give it a bit of margin bottom. Let's fix the position of this navbar. So to do that, I will wrap everything in the home page inside a main section. The main element is to let us wrap around all the main content, which doesn't contain the navbar and the footers. And I'm going to set the margin of the body to 0. And instead, I'm applying the padding to the main element. Let's give it 5%. And there we go. We have applied padding only to the major elements in this homepage, but not the navbar. Okay, for the navbar, let's continue. I'm gonna add a little bit of padding to it. Then let's also add a shadow. To add a shadow, we use box shadow, and it takes 4 arguments. The first one is 0, then 5px, 5px, then finally we specify the color. Okay, that will look great. For all of these arguments, please refer to the documentation. Next, let's fix the color and the text style of these links. To do that, I'm referring to the A elements inside the navbar. And let's set the color to black. To remove the underline, we used text decoration and set it to none. Let's also give them a little bit of margin. And I like to give it a hover effect. Font weight bold. So when we hover on the links here, they will become bolded like this. Next, let's work on the contact form. Again, we have to link the style sheet to our contact HTML like this. And let's wrap everything around a main element. I like to set the form to a flex box and set the flex direction to column. Then for the input fields, as well as the select dropdowns and the text area, let's set the font family to sans serif, and I'm gonna give them a little bit of padding. Let's also give them some border radius. And to remove these awkward black outlines, we can specify the outline property to none. And we also have to change the border. For the submit button, let's refer to that. The submit button, give it an ID of submit. I want it to align to the left instead of expanding to the full width of the web page. To do that, we can use the margin right property, and we set it to auto. It is going to shrink to the left, like this. Similarly, we can do it for the left part as well. Then it will shrink to the right. If we do it to both the left and the right, it is going to align in the center. We may also change the cursor when we hover on this submit button. We do that by specifying the cursor to pointer. Now when we hover over this button, our cursor will be changed into a pointer. There we have successfully transformed our web page from an ugly one to a beautiful, attractive one using CSS. In the next video, we will use JavaScript to handle some of the events and extra functionalities. I'm YellowFlicker, and I will see you in the next episode. Stay tuned.